Oh, hello, everybody. This is Timothy Gager, and welcome to Virtual Fridays Dire Literary Series. And tonight we have the return of Michael Keith, and which is Michael puts out, as you'll find out when we talk to him, puts out so many books he could probably return every month and have something new. So let me go over Michael's bio for you, and you guys can just read along at home, but I will read it out loud, like, kind of like a monthly missile. Michael C. Keith is the author of an acclaimed memoir, The Next Better Place, a young adult novel, Life is Falling Sideways, and 20 short story collections, including Of Night and Light, Everything is Epic, Sad Boy, and Through the Trembling Air, Hoag's Object, The Collector of Tears, If Things Were Made to Last Forever, Caricatures, yes. The Near Enough, Bits-Specks-Crumbs-Flecks, Slow Transit, Perspective Drifts, and I'm going to leave the screen up. You can read them all yourself, and there's a lot of them. His next book, Bodies in Recline, will be published by Pelekinesis in March 2023. And wow, that's a big 5 or 6 months between books, Mike. You kind of slip it up a bit. He was nominated for a Pushcart Prize several times, a Pen O.Henry Award, and was a finalist for the National Indie Excellence Award for Short Fiction Anthology and finalist for the 2013 International Book Award in the Fiction Visionary category. Prior to entering the realm of fiction, Michael wrote several groundbreaking books in the field of radio studies, among them the most widely adopted textbook of the audio medium, The Radio Station, and several monographs on the role of radio in culture and society, including a title chosen by President Clinton to appear on his official summer reading list, Waves of Rancor, co-authored with Robert Hilliard. For his work in this area, he was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award in Scholarship by the Broadcast Education Association, the International Radio Television Society's Stanton Fellow Award, and the University of Rhode Island's Achievement Award in the Humanities. His books have been translated in many languages, and I'm proud to be talking to Michael Keith. And we're going to be talking to Michael, and then he's going to read something. So Michael, when I read your bio and read all of your books, does that sometimes feel overwhelming to you?
Sometimes it doesn't seem realistic. I mean, I remember doing each one of them, but after doing about 15 books in the academic area, I shifted over to creative writing. Not that those weren't creative, but and so now I have a tendency to forget that I ever did anything other than fiction until I'm reminded. I still get requests from people to do things in radio, like write a chapter or appear at some kind of conference and whatnot, or media. I probably get more contacts from media on different topics that I covered in whatnot, and sometimes I find that it's hard for me to even recall a lot of what I was doing, or to feel confident enough to be able to really discuss it with anything that would benefit the person calling, because it just seems like a different lifetime ago. Maybe some of the rest of you shifted gears into some other field and kind of left something behind and have kind of forgotten about it. But I had done enough of the academic stuff and I was kind of fatigued about it. So I'd been drafting and working on a memoir for quite a long time and getting rejected and rejected and rejected, and had practically given up on that when I got an agent through a friend who was with that agency, and they took the book on and sent it out, I think 15 times, and continued to get rejections. And then they hit Algonquin. And the acquisition editor there really loved the book. And that was it. The book was published within a year of that. It was the first time I'd gotten a pretty decent advance on a book that I'd authored. And so after that, I just didn't feel like I wanted to go back and write academic stuff again. It whet my appetite for fiction. I remember a fellow author saying, well-published Tony Early, he said, memoirs are are half memory and half imagination. So I always look at what I did with the memoir as quasi-fiction, even though it's accurate. You still had to, it was 50 years ago, and I still had to, I had to make certain things up that didn't have to do with the factual events, but time, location, characters, places like that. But by the time I was done with that, I just didn't want to go back and write any more monographs or textbooks. And then I shifted over into pure fiction with principally short story writing.
So where is your sweet spot? So say that someone offers you $10,000 to write either memoir, fiction, or something technical on a textbook on radio, and you have a month to write 100 excellent pages. Which one do you do? Which one do you jump into?
Fiction. That's where I'd go there, even though I'd say in those 100 pages, can I have 25 short stories, or do I have to sustain it? Do I have to write a novel? Something that I did write a young adult novel, but that was a zillion years ago. So, but I still think I'd still go that way and attempt it at least, because I think it would be more stimulating and more fun than going back to academic. And in terms of memoir, I don't, I've been asked a couple of times to write the sequel to The Next Better Place. And I said, there really isn't a sequel worth writing, because I just had an adult life. And all of us have gone through, as adults, we've gone through relationships, we've gone through traumas, we've gone through, so I thought, what's unique about me being an adult that I could write an interesting memoir about? So I always kind of avoided it. Algonquin, which is a great press, what I think I mentioned to them, or they mentioned to me about maybe doing a sequel as an adult, because they said, look, you dropped out of high school, but you ended up with a PhD professor at a major university. There's something of a story there, And I said, yeah, but a lot of people have done a lot of things as adults and overcome obstacles and whatnot. And then they said to me, and it kind of surprised me, they said, well, kind of write it as fiction. And I said, write a memoir as fiction?
Yes, James
some people get in trouble for doing that.
Yes, James Frey, please write it as fiction.
Yeah. And they said, well, we wouldn't sell it as a memoir per se. We could sell it as a novel based on fact, based on reality. And I get plenty of that stuff out there.
Yeah, you've written a YA novel. So have you written a novel for adults? And there's a fine line between YA books and adult books these days. Yeah. So
no, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, when I wrote the young adult novel, Life is Falling Sideways, I sent it to Algonquin, and they had just opened or just started a young adult imprint at Algonquin. And so the fiction editor who read it and the young adult editor read it, and they both said the problems they had was they felt it was, the young adult editor said it's too adult, and the adult editor said it's too young adult. And so I didn't know what the heck to do with that. And then I thought, well, I should just harden it up and go adult with it. But after that, I just decided, a friend of mine, Robert Hilliard, as a matter of fact, had a little imprint, Parlance, that he was publishing his own novels. And he said, why don't I just publish it, or we'll publish it together. So it's like a quasi self-published, I always think of it. And it did, it published as a young adult book. I think it's still somewhere out there, but then I let it go. And I've always felt that it was probably worthwhile to go back to and to really focus it in on the adult angle of it, because
Why not?
there's enough happening in this book to do that. But here I sit, having not done it, probably never will, and I'll write my 23rd collection of short stories instead.
Well, what about, have you tried your hand in poetry? That's another one that I didn't
Oh
see.
boy, yeah, my hand in poetry. I think my hand was arthritic when I tried that. You know something, a very funny thing, when I was very young, like in my teens, early 20s, I wrote some poetry, and I put together a little book called Fragments in the Dust. And it was homemade, actually literally homemade. And I took it to a few stores and they put it on consignment. And then I forgot about it. And I don't even have a copy of it. But I came across some draft pages of it. And I thought, a good thing you didn't pursue poetry, looking at it 30 years later. But you know something, I found like 4 or 5 pieces in it that I thought were good, and I've since added to collections. But beyond that, no, I haven't tried poetry. I'll leave it to the poets out there, like DeWitt and Lindy, and probably the rest of you. But now the funny thing, and you're probably going to ask this question, is what I do has been called prose poetry, by a few people, and I'm not sure about that, but I'll let you go ahead and ask questions.
I've got a bunch of questions, so let's briefly respond to some of these. You have so much out there, and you produce so much. What is a typical day of productive writing for you?
Writing one thing that I feel good about, and that may take me 5 minutes. And it would be a microfiction / prose poetry. It just, I don't know where it comes from, but it just kind of pops there. And then I know almost instantly that it has what I call ping, that it has a little bit of literary magic to it. And that's a good day if you can produce something like that. I mean, I've written a half dozen pieces of prose poetry in a day, and not to say any of those were ping worthy, but then I've had those days where you just get in the groove, and it just is a good day.
Yeah. Well, so when you're writing and you're in a groove, you miss meals? Does it affect your sleep? Does it affect your relationships?
I never miss meals. I'm not going to miss a meal for poetry or prose poetry. I think, it's my peace zone. I've never had problems going to sleep because of my writing. Because my writing generally, and maybe the rest of you who are writers, that's where it's okay. It's a space that's okay. Other things keep me from speaking, like Tuesday, politics and all of that stuff. That'll keep me, awake. As far as relationships are concerned, my wife's an artist. Above this room is her studio, and she's up there working on her own stuff. So she doesn't have any problem with me spending half my life. Sometimes she has said, you spend an awful lot of time in your office, an awful lot of time on your computer, but generally no.
In terms of your flash fiction, in terms of your flash fiction, who's had the most influence on it?
Who has had the most influence on me?
Yeah, who do you consider, like, you read them and you're like, wow, I want to, sit behind my keyboard and produce?
Probably authors that I know, as opposed to, over the years. I mean, it's amazing how many renowned authors who are renowned for novels and even poetry have written some prose poetry or some microfiction. Hemingway did. I mean, it's all there, but it doesn't seem to have come to the fore until more recent years that it's been more established as a genre, as a legitimate literary genre. It's in kind of a renaissance right now, as a matter of fact. A lot of people are writing prose poetry. And so a lot of I have several friends like Robert Scalero and Meg Pogras, who are wonderful microfiction writers and are publishing, and we're publishing together as a matter of fact. So that's, you know, I can't say, oh, I'm sorry. You know, I left out the biggest influence of all in terms of prose, in terms of microfiction, Lydia Davis.
Oh, very nice.
Lydia Davis. I've got all of her books. I have a book of her collected works that I've gone through so many times. The cover and the cover art is now blank. It's now literally gone, and I'd take a magic marker and write Lydia Davis collection on there. You know, it was for a time, a few years ago, I would sit down with that book, I'd open it up, and within the first line, I had a piece of microfiction in my head. I'd walk into my office, hit the keyboard, in 5 or 10 minutes it was there. She had that kind of effect on me. I mean, just remarkable. I bet you I got 100, 200, 300 pieces inspired by my contact with reading Lydia Davis. So for me, she's numero uno.
Yeah, I had someone like that. You just read it, and it's almost the rhythm of their work is appropriate to the rhythm of your work. And it's just, you know, you're like totally in sync. But in terms of like writing, do you read any books on craft of writing? I know that Lydia Davis turned into that, but
yeah, funny you should ask.
And have you thought of writing one yourself?
I did. I just got this the other day, and I think DeWitt knows this, and he also knows Cassandra Atherton, because we both attend Lit Balm, that she's co-host with Mark Vincennes of Mad Hat, and I ordered this, and I think it's extraordinary. I mean, it's 350 pages of real scholarship and real depth into prose poetry and smaller letters, microfiction. And she's a practitioner of that art. And I communicate with, she's in Australia. We exchanged books, and her book I ordered, and I sent her a book. I got the book I ordered in about 3 days. And it took 3 weeks for her to get the book I sent her in Australia. But I highly, if you're interested in short fiction, prose poetry, and micro fiction, I recommend this. DeWitt may have other suggestions, but that's the one. Beyond that, there are some articles that have been written on it, and I don't have my notes in front of me now, that were groundbreaking. There was something written about 2 or 3 decades ago and delivered at a conference, and of course now I can't even recall the gentleman's name, but it really anticipated what they did in this book and whatnot. There's not a lot of work out there on the microfiction prose poetry genre. Where there's millions of books out there on literature. This is an area that hasn't been written about a whole lot.
The field guide to flash fiction is a really good one too.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I don't have that, but I'm planning to check it out. You know something, the other thing is I feel like I want to be careful about reading too much about it, because it's been a form that has just flowed from me without question. It was just there. It was the easiest thing I ever wrote, and it just manifested itself as if some muse just swam through me to the keyboard, and it was so easy, and it still is. It's so easy. At any time I can say, I'm going to write a piece of prose poetry or microfiction, and I go right to the keyboard, and I'll write one, So I thought, don't overanalyze it, don't overstudy it. It may inhibit you, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
But don't think too much about your golf swing. Just hit the damn ball.
Yeah, right.
So real quick, I got 3 quick questions to wrap up with. So out of all your books, not necessarily the best, which one is your favorite?
Whoa, that's a good question. Well, of course, I have to say that my memoir, because that one, that's me.
Yeah. Wow.
That one I really, really, really wanted to see in print. And my good friend Lindy, who I went to grad school with, she knew about that 100 years ago, and she knew it was years that I would be sending out and looking for agent, and nothing ever happened until it did happen. So that tops the list. This is a textbook which became the most widely adopted textbook in America and then in the world. And it's in its 10th edition. I did 8 editions of it, and I was so burned out by it. I just told the publisher, I'm done. Why don't you get somebody else to do it? And they did find, and it still exists with two different. So this really, really put me on the map in my area of communications. It really, really did. So that's a precious one. A book I did as a monograph, Waves of Rancor, co-authored it, ended up in the White House. And back there's a letter from Clinton saying, thank you for doing this book, because it examined the use of media by the radical right. And so that was kind of important. And in terms of all the fiction, I've done 21 or 22 fiction collections. That's tough. It's kind of tough to pick one out there. I would say maybe Insomnia 11, because it got some really good reviews, and I think that might stand up as something worthwhile. The one I just did this summer, Quiet Geography, kind of like that. This is the first hardcover out of the 22. This was published in hardcover, and that, so I guess that
you love all your children equally.
Yeah, and then you always look forward. I think the one that Pelekinesis is going to do is pretty solid. And I have another manuscript at a publisher that I look back on. And I think, this is not too bad, But you don't want to become too happy with what you do, because then you just stop doing it. So I'm really not happy with anything I've done. I mean, totally happy.
So Michael, you said you'd like to read like for 4 or 5 minutes. So why don't you do that before we run out of time here?
All right. Yeah, 2 or 3 minutes, because these are real shorties.
Tell people where they're from too.
Okay, I will. I'm going to read a couple of pieces from Quiet Geography, Cervena Barba. You've published with them, Tim. And then I'll read a couple of pieces that come from the Late Epiphany of a Loki Oracle from Scantic. And then I'll read a couple of pieces that'll be published from Pelekinesis. And I just drew from them because they were immediately at hand on my desk. Okay, doesn't necessarily mean I chose these because they're brilliant, but they were close by. Okay, this is called A Warm Welcome. Heloise's husband brought home a friend from his long ago past. It was obvious he'd experienced hard times. Despite his shabby look, he was very gentlemanly, even courtly, and she was taken with him almost immediately. When her husband said he needed to pick up something at the store, she said that he should leave his friend, I'm butchering this, that he should leave his friend behind so they could get better acquainted. He thought that was a great idea. When he left on his errand, Heloise offered to give his friend a bath. This is called from a lecture by the professor of thanatology. It was common in the old days to lay out the deceased in the home, often on the kitchen or dining room table. At mealtime, the family of the recently departed would set plates and silverware around the corpse, placing condiments on it if space was tight. This was especially the case if the dead person's body was large. Of course, this would sometimes result in relishes and sauces falling to the floor. This is called making a meal for Melissa was uncomplicated. She was very, very, very fond of chickpea soup. In fact, it was her favorite food. This was well known among her family and friends, who would serve her chickpea soup wherever she came to their house and whenever she came to their house for lunch or supper. Thank you very much for serving me chickpea soup, she would say, with a genuine smile of gratitude. And then she would say, as you know, it is my favorite food. These, let's see, I think these quickies here are from the Pelekinesis book. This is called Immaculate Conception 2. She grew flowers from her vagina at a time when other girls were experiencing their first periods. A spray of fairy foxgloves and forget-me-nots had sprung from her lap. She believed she was having her first menstruation, since no one had told her what to expect. The following month, to her joy and further puzzlement, a lovely baby's breath appeared. And this one, last but not least, is called On the Side of Caution. We have a repairman coming to fix our dishwasher. When he arrives, he asks to use our bathroom as he's dealing with an upset stomach. We hesitate to let him because we find the idea of a stranger emptying his afflicted bowels in our house worrisome. That would worry us. What if he leaves behind diseases that infect us? Can he guarantee this will not happen? We ask him. He says he cannot guarantee that. And we decide we can't take the risk and we'll do the dishes by hand. So that should keep you away from anything I write.
Oh, stop it. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And if folks want to know more about Michael and his books, it's michaelckeith.com, and you can find out about him. There's some writing samples, there's notes about his academic career, and definitely stuff about his books. So Michael, thank you so much once again for being here with us.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. And I think this is the 5th time I've been with you.
For Dyer, yeah, 5th time total.
In Dyer. Well, actually, you invited me 20 years ago when my memoir came out. So we go back quite a ways.
We do. So folks, thank you for watching on the stream on Facebook. We're going to have an open mic now. So if you would like to use the link and log on, that's how you can get involved into that. Otherwise, next week, come on back. We've got Jim Shepard, and it should be a great evening. So thanks for watching on the stream. And Michael, thank you again.